Welcome to the New School. Thank you all very much for coming. My name is Karen Kooni. I'm the director of the Vera List Center for Art and Politics and one of the very proud co-organizer and co-presenters of this conference, the Photographic Universe. Welcome to the second day of a two-day conference that began yesterday that will also be on the web, and at some point in the future we hope to publish a book, the proceedings of the conference. I would like to immediately extend my deep appreciation to the collaborators. Foremost, I'd like to acknowledge Arthur O, who is the professor, I'm sorry, he's a professor, but he's also director of the BFA program of photography at Parsons, the New School for Design. He conceived and conceptualized this conference and did so in the collaboration with the Aperture Foundation. And there I would like to extend our deep thanks to Cristina Caputo in particular, and in collaboration with the Vera List Center for Art and Politics, where Annie Shaw needs to be acknowledged. The conference also had the generous support of the Spielman Institute of Photography, and we will hear after a brief greeting from Cristina Caputo from the Spielman Institute and its director, Romy Mikulinski, in a few moments. Arthur presented the conference and conceived of the conference as an opportunity to consider where photography is now, and very poignantly pointed out that we may have reached a point where we are in a similar position of discovery and reflection as at the very beginnings of photography. And he put it like this in the program in your hands. He said, quite possibly, photography is now in a similar place to where it was during the first few decades of its invention, a time when its emerging cultural significance quickly expanded due to the innovative technological developments. And I think we saw some of that, or quite a bit of it, yesterday. I'm not going to summarize the presentations, but there were some very provocative thoughts, such as the reference to Facebook as having become a memorial in some cases. And of course, the original impulse of photography contained also the desire to memorialize people who are no longer with us. Other speakers spoke of North Africa and the developments in the Middle East and the necessity to develop relationships with the subjects that one wants to document or photograph. Anyway, so there were many different references to original impulses behind photography that are very important to practitioners today. With that, and again, my thanks to my colleagues, I am pleased to introduce Cristina Caputo, who will now say a few words on behalf of the Aperture Foundation.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Karen. Welcome to day 2, following a very impressive and amazing series of events, a series of programs with really incredible thoughts and dialogue that Aperture is proud and honored to be a part of. I just want to tell you a little bit about Aperture. For those of you that don't know, we were founded in 1952, and we are a world-renowned publisher and exhibition space dedicated to promoting photography. We are a nonprofit foundation, and our programs include artist lectures, panel discussions, limited editions, and traveling exhibitions. There is a table outside, and you can sign up to find out about future projects and events, and also there are books available by some of the participants today, and you can also find out about, as Chris Boot mentioned yesterday, Charlotte Cotton's Words Without Pictures will soon be available as an e-publication. And if you sign up for our newsletter, you can find out when that will be available. A special thanks to and credit to the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the American Society of Media Photographers, and the Milton and Sally Avery Charitable Trust who support our programs. The Spielman Institute for Photography for supporting this specifically event, and of course, a big thanks to the New School, especially Karen, Annie, Pam, Arthur, and also Romy from Spielman. So thank you very much.
Hi, good morning, and thank you all for arriving today to the second day of the Photographic Universe. I am Dr. Romy Mikulinski from the Spielman Institute for Photography, and I wish to say that we too are honored and proud to be part of this fantastic venture that Aperture, the Realist Center, Parsons, the New School have brought together. I'm sure that the talks today will be as fascinating as the talks that took place yesterday, as well as the stimulating conversation with the audience. I believe that the format that Arthur and his team have come up with really works to create this kind of exchange with practitioners, theorists, people coming from technological background, researchers, and photographers themselves. I'd like to speak briefly about the Spielman Institute for Photography that was founded about a year ago in Tel Aviv. The founder, Shalom Spielman, is a retired businessman whose passion for photography made him begin a PhD at the Goldsmith Institute, become an avid collector, and also delve into the world of photography from many different angles. It is a fortunate event that our path have crossed, and we have gathered a group of people enthusiastic about photography from many different directions, be it the philosophical angle, or practical angle, or the conceptual way to look at photography. And we've been collaborating with individuals and organizations, be it in Europe or in Israel. We've supported exhibitions, we've translated text of Moholy Nagy or Walid Bashti. We're looking into different perspectives into photography, and especially to understand the world not only through writings on photography, but also through the lens itself. We have just closed the first round of grants. Our annual grant program has commenced in December 2010, and we're very surprised to receive over 500 applications from researchers from all over the world. We're just beginning the process of evaluation, but we're excited and again honored to receive so much feedback from researchers and curators and writers and people interested in photography and interested in advancing our understanding of photography, in making it more accessible, more understandable in this crucial moment where photography reinvents itself, asks crucial questions, and wonders what it is, and then how it functions. Nevertheless, I think that it is our mission to create this kind of a dynamic hive of researchers, curators, photographers, people just that are interested in photography, be it from the practical side or from the theoretical side. And I hope that you will look at our website, www.thesib.org, and possibly join forces with us and help us shape and then create this kind of new path that we're going into, because we're brand new, and whereas photography is about, I'd say, 150 years old, others would say more. I think that in this critical moment, being here, thinking here together, discussing what it is something that is just the beginning for the Institute in person. I mean, me as the, I'm blanking. Anyway, I'm honored to be here, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and thank you.
So, good morning. Welcome. Welcome to the second day of the conference. I want to just describe the format again today. So each session will be started with the 10-minute presentation from each speaker, followed by a 20-minute conversation and a short time for questions from the audience. I'd like to welcome Richard Benson and Frank Kost for the first session today. We will start with a video that we recorded with Richard a few weeks ago, in which Richard talks about his long involvement in the printing of photographs and working with photography in general. So we will start with that, and I'll welcome Frank Kost to come up and give his presentation after that.
Arthur has edited the video. I have no idea what he's done to it. I didn't think I could be here, and that's why we did a video.
Yes.
Being fundamentally lazy, I decided let's do it.
No, we're delighted that Richard can join us in person.
Well, you might not be, Arthur.
Okay.
I've always been frustrated with something about photography, which is that when you make a print in the dark room, you turn the lights off, you go in this room where it's dark, where you can't see anything, which is stupid to begin with, and you do something to a piece of paper, and then you find out whether it's any good or not. And if it's no good, you throw it away, and you make another one. And I've always been frustrated with that practice as opposed to the practice of the painter who goes up to the canvas and does something and sees what's been done, and then something that was done tells the painter what could be done next. So the process of making the picture becomes cumulative, and the thing being made keeps talking back to the maker. And so, because I worked as a printer, I got used to taking pictures apart and reassembling them on the printing press with different kinds of ink. We take a picture apart and reassemble it as a duotone with black ink and gray ink. And the minute you start to take it apart, you realize when you put one part of it down, that part tells you what the next part can be. So you start to become like the painter. So I've always been interested in that cumulative step-by-step aspect of the making of things as opposed to the one shot of making something which you do in the darkroom. Here I was in a printing company working with ink and offset plates and a collotype shop in the same place. And I started making negatives with this big old camera and starting to print them, and I didn't understand about photographic papers and their contrast ranges and all this stuff. And I was very unhappy with whatever I could do with normal silver papers. So I got some books and I read up about the history of photographic printing. And I found that there's this huge variety of ways of making a print that were not practiced anymore. This was in the 1960s, and it was the era of the developing out silver print. You know, that was how you made a photographic print. And so here I was in a printing company where we were doing hands-on printing with ink. And I said to myself, well, maybe I should figure out what these old chemical processes were. And I did a lot of work on learning how to do all those. And so that's why from the very beginning I was interested in how the print was made. It seems to me that the viable main line of photography is shifting to the electronic image. And I think that the photograph sitting on this thing is what's going to be relevant in the future rather than the paper print. I have a bunch of friends who were middle-aged or older who are photographers, and they have not made the transition to the digital. And I'm of their age. I've made the transition to the digital, but I'm not willing to make the transition to the electronic image. I'm still interested in the print image. That's the way I'm stuck in the past. But the thing that's ironic is that the new digital technologies, to my mind, are way and away the finest printing processes that have ever existed. They're better than anything that's existed in the past. So I find myself very, very excited to use this new technology that's going to destroy photography to make the best versions of it I've ever seen. So,
how would you, approach, the teaching of photography now that it's shifted from the print?
By the time I started teaching in around 1979 or 1980, I'd accumulated this huge body of technical craft knowledge about photography and printing. And when I started as a teacher, it seemed to me that was the thing to teach, was the nuts and bolts of how to make things. Because I was kind of shocked to find that it didn't matter how smart students were, they didn't have a clue about how to make something. Making something is a complicated, difficult thing. And so it's very odd to me when the teaching of photography starts to become about something else. And it can become about the psychology of the photographer. It can come about all sorts of big issues about art, the most boring thing in the world, issues about art. But I've always taken refuge in the fact that I can teach students how to make things. Now, at the same time that's happened, it has seemed to me that the broad interest in photography has changed, and it's gone away from the photography that I love. Not the printing, but the photography that I love, the world of Atget and Evans and Cartier-Bresson and Winogrand and Robert Frank. And so now as a teacher, I find myself pushing that aspect of photography and saying, look, don't do all this stupid conceptual stuff, and don't do all these stupid things where you set everything up and pose and all that. Go out into the world with the camera and photograph and find out that the world is smarter than you are. So I find myself more and more teaching less about the making of things and more about what I think the interesting part of photography is.
Do you think that the printed photograph still has a role in the future?
I don't think the printed photograph is ever going to go away. I don't think film's ever going to go away. And I think it's probably going to become a minor aspect of the medium. You know, as technology rolls along, all the mediums that use it, whether it's making cars and highways or airplanes or photography or whatever, you know, all practices that use technology ride on the front of the wave of technological change. And the thing that's socially viable is on the front of that wave. And I think for decades, the photographic print was there. And it started to fade when it got transferred into magazines and books and started to become an ink replicas spread around everywhere. And I think the front of that wave is going to be electronic imagery, whether it's video or still. And the print is going to be this thing rolling off to the side like all the other semi-dead technologies. And we're going to love it and keep doing it, but it's going to become minor. So I think I'm desperately practicing a minor art and hoping it lives as long as I do.
I'm thrilled to be here. I've been following Richard Benson's work for almost 3 decades now, and I come from a different background, but I think you'll see that we are converging on many of the same ideas here. I come from Rochester Institute of Technology, where we have a collection of artifacts documenting the history of the printed book primarily, but printing in general. And if you go into that library, you'll notice that you can step through really 5, almost 6 centuries of books that incorporate text and pictures. This is the first one by Aldus Manutius, who was a Venetian printer, 1499. But I'll sort of step through the next 7 centuries here, where the sort of like the end of the 1400s and the beginning of the 2100s, I guess. And you can see that the form has pretty much stayed the way it has always been. And I grew up in a family where these were great revered objects, and grew up with a love of the book from the time I was a child, as many of you did. I also grew up with a darkroom, and so I loved photography, and I loved the idea of putting photographs and text together into a book. Of course, I could only dream of these things up until very recently, doing them myself, unless I was working on a book with a number of other people and laboring over that. This is one of my favorite books in the Cary collection are the photographs from the collection of the Gilman Paper Company, and all of the reproductions in this book were done by Richard Benson over a period of several years of incredible labor, using a single color press to make as perfect reproductions of those original photographs, the history of photography, as he possibly could. And it's an absolutely exquisite book. It's gigantic. You really need 2 people to read this book, because you can hardly lift the thing. Books are complicated things. They're made of thousands of tiny little pieces. Any one of them can go wrong, and if you're in the book publishing business, you know that if one of those little pieces goes wrong, you've got a problem, a typo or whatever. And so it's always been very, very complicated to put all of these pieces together into something, into a finished product. But recently, in the past 5-6 years, we've started to see the development of these automated systems for producing books that really allow you to not have to worry about keeping track of all of those thousands of pieces and give you some degree of automation. And these systems, web-based systems, are becoming more and more sophisticated. There's a company in Rochester called ColorCentric that services many of the companies that you may know, Blurb and Lulu and companies like that. And ColorCentric is specifically set up to produce books from content that comes to them over the web in very, very clean and standard formats. And there are several ways to get to ColorCentric. You don't see that company, but the factory is designed to be able to produce those artifacts we call books and be driven by a web-based interface. Some of those interfaces, such as Lulu, Blurb, Lightning Source for a more commercial type of publishing, are available to you. And in fact, if you use Lulu or Blurb, the cost of publishing a book, the cost other than your time is zero. You can publish a book for zero, and you can have that book distributed globally from their system. And this is a revolution, obviously. The book has been around for a long time and has had, and we all know what the book is. But one thing I started to ask about 6-8 years ago was, what would happen if we were able to take all of this digital technology and put it together creatively to be able to make books have characteristics that they traditionally did not have? And in fact, that's really been my quest for the past 5 or 6 years, is to really try to answer that question. What could a book be if it was liberated from all of the work that went into making it? We have a private press we started in 2001, just as we were getting to the point where digital print was becoming a viable way of reproducing a photograph. Digital cameras were just becoming a viable way of capturing a photograph. And the books that we did back in 2001, 2002 were pretty primitive by today's standards. But nonetheless, we had acquired the ability to create a number of templates and things like that allowed us to very quickly make books. And this became very helpful when the web services came online in the middle of that decade. I started a project in 2006 called the Instant Book Project, and essentially this was leveraging that technology. And in fact, the first company that I started using was a company called Lulu.com. And it allowed you to make a commercial quality product, and the inspiration at that point, all of the forces came together, and I said, I've got this idea of an instant book. An instant book is a book that is created and published in a single day. All of the content comes together and is published on that same day. And you can have it manufactured in a quantity of 1 or 1 million. And that's the capability we have today. This book, 22 Seconds in Chennai, happened by accident. I was driving in the back of a taxi cab in Chennai in India, and I wanted to take a video, but all I had was my SLR, my digital SLR. And so I pointed it out the window, and I basically put it on 5 frames a second, and I just squeezed the shutter until it filled the buffer. And I ended up with 110 frames, thinking that I would stitch them together, and I did stitch them together into a video to put up on YouTube, and you can watch that today if you want to. But the book actually... I brought that book for you to take a look at. It's very, very surprising because I had no idea what the content of this book would be when I was actually creating the images for the book. So I set up a set of rules: no cropping, no retouching, no reordering of the pictures, and they have to be published on the same day as the content is created. And I've created dozens of books like this, and it's. Of course, I have sequence books, 12 Seconds at the Lilac Festival. I brought some of these for you to take a look at. the curtain call of a play at our local high school, the entire curtain call, a moment during my son's high school graduation where all the boys in his high school were jumping up and down and celebrating, and I got that into a book. A book of pictures of a colleague of mine sitting in my office one day ranting about something and making all these wonderful gestures, and I put that into a book. A book about a road trip that we took down to the Wells College Book Arts Institute. A book that documents my daughter Elaine's room at the age of 14. This is probably my favorite book because it captures my daughter at a very precious age. A book that documents a haircut that I had. I actually gave this to the barber, Helen Trong is her name. She's been my barber for a long, long time. And she was so thrilled that they gave me free haircuts for a long time just because they love the book so much. A book that documents the basement floor. My kids had drawn all these pictures on the basement floor growing up and created their own little world. And we were going to paint the basement floor, and my wife said, don't paint it, don't paint it. I love those pictures. So I photographed the whole basement floor and gave it to her as a gift before we painted the basement floor. Here's a book about just walking through a bunch of ducks that were blocking my path one day, and they were disrupted. And the book just kind of shows some amazing pictures of ducks, by the way, that I've never seen. I've taught classes to students at RIT, trying to get them to focus on the immediate. Let's get right to the moment. Let's try to create something that's just purely photographic. And they've done some interesting work, but mostly students try to put their whole lives into a book. They try to cram a lot into a book. This is one of the more interesting ones about a trip that some of the students took to the opening of a Johnny Cupcakes, and I've got the red light here. So I'm going to finish, but here's one last book that it is from a video. I gave my students a video during my last lecture last year, and they basically passed the video camera around, and then I took still frames out of that and created a book that's a document of my last lecture. And I'll sort of leave that chart there. The red represents where we've always lived for the past 5, 6 centuries or thousands of years before that, really, when you think about it. The green represents where we can live today, and I think the possibilities are really endless before us, what books can become and what photography can become. And thank you very much.
All right. Are we working? Oh,
Yes.
Well, I can tell we're working. We're echoing. That's very, very, very interesting what you spoke about. And because we're going to have a conversation, maybe I'll talk about the same thing for a minute or two from the exact opposite point. Because I'm tremendously excited by these changes. They're tremendous. They have altered the world of the book as we've known it. But, you know, I'm basically an old fart, you know. I won't get any worse than that, Arthur. Arthur knows that he has to chop my speeches quite severely about the words I use. But, and I love the old book. You know, you put the oldest book up and my pulse goes up, you know. And I've tried to figure out what it is about the old book that we might be losing with the new book. And the thing that most sticks in my mind is that the old book was very hard to make and very expensive to make.
Yes.
And so the people who put the money up for it were very careful about what was in it. Now, it might have had propaganda in it, or it might have had wonderful pictures of the world in it, but tremendous care was exercised in that content. And so I came to believe in the content of the book. You know, don't believe everything that's printed. Well, I did believe most of what's printed. And I'm now very nervous about printed material that can be tailored to suit me. And I don't trust the tailor.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And so I think that one of the great things the book did is the book gave the king and the pauper access to the same body of knowledge. And that was one of the great democratizing forces in the world. And so I'd like to somehow embrace that technology. Your chart has disappeared. That was unfair. It was a great chart. Doesn't matter. But I would like to somehow embrace that technology and yet be aware that we're walking on a precipice of abuse.
I think
Yeah.
I believe that humans have always lived on that precipice. All the most wonderful things in life can be the instruments of abuse, right? Human love can be the instrument of abuse if you look at it that way. But I really believe that, and I agree with you that the authority of a book is now challenged. What does it mean to if you walk through the color-centric factory, for example, on any one day, you will see literally thousands of titles being produced in that factory. And they are all the weirdest, many of them are the weirdest things you'd ever want to see.
But thank God there's only one of each.
Well, some people, I've seen books in there, Uncle Ted's Stories about Saranac Lake or something like that, and there are, 150 copies because people are now able to do that. But I don't worry about technology. I don't worry about the problem of the corruption of the truly what's truly good in the world, and maybe it's because I'm younger than you are and more naive than you are, but
No, you just probably have a better personality than I. That's all.
Because I think I think the good will rise, and we all know what that is.
That's completely naive, Frank. Yeah.
I'm happy to be on tape here. Being accused of being naive,
So if we leave the book for the moment, what about this digital revolution that's happened? When you think about our medium, you and I, we both worked in the printing trades, and so the computer hit us before it hit almost anybody else, because printing has always been a terrible mess. And the minute digital technology came in, we had primitive scanners 25 years ago, everything got better. And this revolution then spread much, much more quickly than I ever imagined to encompass all of photography.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just this overwhelming improvement in the medium. Is that your feeling too?
That is my feeling. In fact, I have colleagues still to this day who make statements about the fact that film is, digital still doesn't give you the quality of film or the look of film or the dynamic range of film or whatever. And I have to say that I struggled with film for 40 years.
Yeah, it stinks.
From the time I started, as a kid in the darkroom, and the minute I started, my first digital camera was a Kodak 100. It was a almost a little bit more than a VGA quality digital camera. Mm-hmm. And from that moment, the idea of being able to capture an image and then bring the image into a computer and be able to manipulate those pixels, I believe that the quality of the photography today with a digital camera far surpasses what we were.
Yeah, so
what I was ever able to do. Now, maybe I was never skilled enough. But I worked hard at it.
Frank, let's really say this definitively, right? It's all better.
Everything's better.
I can get my
we firmly assert.
This is two old timers who really believe
that everything is better. Everything is better.
Yeah, no, we don't have the security blanket of this nice physical little piece of plastic we can stuff in our pocket and cherish in a safe somewhere and leave for some poor future that's going to have to deal with it. But the fact is, I happen to use a Canon. The cameras are all good now. I can get my Canon that looks like a 35 millimeter camera, and the bloody thing renders like a 6x9.
Right.
And it doesn't have that terrible mess of the blue layer being way down and screwed up that film always had. And the color rendition is beautiful. And so I bring this up because I think it's nice if you and I can say this together.
Let's say it in unison.
Yeah.
Everything is better. Oh.
Right, okay. But then the other thing, then let me go on and say the other thing. I still teach. I don't know why, but I still do. Do you still teach?
I still teach.
And the people I teach tend to be younger than I am. And they're carrying around 4x5 cameras, and they're photographing with film, and they're scanning and making these terrible transforms because of the stupid orange mask in the film for C printing, which we no longer can do because the processors are all dead. And they're making, now finally admitting they have to make digital prints, and they could just grab a digital camera and the whole thing would be so much better. So what's going on?
I find the past couple of years, my students have become very conservative, and
Yeah.
in fact, I walk into a classroom now. I walked into a classroom recently with a Kindle, an Amazon Kindle, which I do all of my reading. I do all my text reading on the Kindle now, pretty much. And I had a belligerent group of students start arguing with me that this was not really the same as reading a book, and a book you could curl up, and all the mythology about the printed book, which I love. I mean, I'm the world's greatest champion of the printed book. I love printed books, but I still enjoy reading the newspaper on a Kindle or a book on the Kindle. My students are arguing with me, though, about that.
Yeah.
They argue with me about film photography. It's almost as though our roles are reversed, and us old guys are now we are arguing with our students who are arguing for the past, and
Yeah.
we're arguing for the future.
Yeah, see, the way it's always seemed to me is that photography has had a series of revolutions, and certainly one of the great ones was the dry plate. My friend Todd Papageorge always said with the invention of the dry plate, photography could become more like poetry than carpentry, because they didn't have to worry about making it anymore. They could worry about the picture.
Right.
And maybe that's where it went to hell, actually. Maybe the dry plate ruined it. But then there was a revolution of the hand camera, where the camera came off the tripod. And if I had been a young photographer in the 1930s, I would have grabbed the Leica before my wife, who at that point was, the center of my life. Not in the 40s it was. So it seems to me that we're in the middle of this other revolution, which is that these incredible tools are available and everything is different. And why aren't young people embracing it to the fullest degree?
Well, I think
it's a mystery to me. Maybe we'll have some good statements
Interesting
after you and I
questions.
stop running off at the mouth. But
My whole goal has been to get back to the point where, and where I can not have to think about the technology that goes between the image, the seeing of something in the world that I'm interested in, the reacting to that photographically with a camera, capturing something, and a finished product. And we have the technology today. I can program my camera so that it knows where the white point is. I can program it so that I can program the curves. I can program the exposure. I can set the camera up so that the data it delivers to me is perfect. I have colleagues who will argue that what I should be doing with a camera, and they may be right in some applications, is I should be shooting raw images and then take them into the digital darkroom and do all the work in the digital darkroom to the raw images. But in some cases that makes sense. But for me, to program the camera to give me the perfect file to go into the perfect structure, and to result in an hour or a few hours in a finished product that looks like this, instead of and I welcome you to come and take a look at these, but something that looks like this, in the same. It's easier, in effect, for me technically to produce this than it ever was to produce that first good print in the darkroom.
yeah, so I'm probably one of those other colleagues, probably
Because of the way you work.
I photograph in camera raw.
Right.
And this is the power of the revolution, that you can do this thing where you eliminate all the stuff in the middle, and I can have more stuff in the middle than I've ever had.
Right.
One of the things that astonishes me about the digital technology is that I can now make a picture that better renders the world than anything I had before. And so I have this very, very conservative idea about what photography is. I think it turned up in the video, which is that I think the world is more interesting than my mind. And I find that if I can render the world with clarity, then there's a content in it that illuminates me, and if the picture's good, illuminates somebody else, has a potential to. And the shocker to me is this new medium is so great at that. I'm not interested in changing the color of somebody's bathing suit. I'm certainly not interested in putting your head on mine, on my body, you know. But here we have this technology, and we can make a better, clearer picture of the world than we ever could before.
Right, right.
And that, to me, is just astonishing.
I'm 100%.
So there's two completely different things we can do with
But
this.
I agree with you 100%. I agree, and my goal is the same. I don't come out of an art background, though. I come out of a photojournalism, documentary. The best we could do when I first came into this business was 65 lines on newsprint.
Yeah, well, thank
Okay,
God I came out of a printing background, too, so I avoided the art background, too. Maybe that was a secret.
But I think that for me, getting 5 distinguishable gray tones on a piece of paper was an accomplishment. And so today, so my goal is always to document. I'm not a fine printer. I don't think of myself that way. But when I look at your work, I realize that's a world that is also enabled by all of this technology in exactly the same way.
You were very sweet to show a picture of the Gilman book. The Gilman book took 4.5 years. It's the reproductions of 200 plates, 200 black and white photographs. And as Frank said, they were done on a single color press, a Mealy 29. And I had a helper, my friend Thomas Palmer, who now makes beautiful halftones for books. And I don't think Thomas and I slept through the night for 4.5 years in blind terror that we would screw it up, you know. But we got the thing done, and it was the end of analog photography and halftone work for me. And the people at Gilman had the lack of judgment to let me write an afterword. And in the afterword, I make this tirade about the fact that there's no computer involved anywhere. That's what an ignoramus I was. This was 1986. And so that book that was the culmination of everything I ever knew in the analog world was the end. It's very, very interesting.
Yep.
And it was really, for me, the step into the new world of things all being handled digitally.
The Gilman book is one of those artifacts that you must see the book itself. It makes no sense.
Hardly anybody bought it.
Well,
I think there's still 500 in a warehouse in Florida.
I would like one of those. I showed it hoping that maybe you'd say, "Oh, gee, the guy, I'll give him a copy."
No, I actually had 3 of them. And my wife said she and I should have designed and marketed legs to be screwed on it, so it could replace the coffee table rather than breaking the coffee table.
Yeah.
But one of the 3 that I had was the original mock-up where we pasted the plates in, and a Yale student spilled a cup of coffee on it at my house. It was quite extraordinary.
It wasn't one of
No, it wasn't
David
Laspina. He was safe. No, and it wasn't Pam Pecchio
I have to.
or Katie Murray.
I have to also say David Laspina was a student at RIT and then went to Yale, and so he's the connector
I've been
between
wondering
the
who
two
to
of us.
blame.
So I thank you for that.
But I gave the book to Yale.
You know what?
The coffee book.
If you come into the library and you look at some of the examples of photographic reproduction, my favorite is the what's the process that used the gelatin?
Carbon Woodbury type.
Woodbury type.
Yeah,
Woodbury types.
yeah.
These absolutely beautiful prints.
The most insane system for making a print ever devised.
Ever devised.
It's a cast of a carbon print.
It's a cast.
Yeah.
Essentially, what you would do is produce a film using a dichromate, right?
You produce a variable thickness gelatin
very
relief.
right.
Dry it with alcohol on a sheet of glass. Press it at 2,000 pounds per square inch into a sheet of lead.
Yes.
Turn the sheet of lead over, put it on the bed of a press, pour hot gelatin with pigment in it, lay a piece of paper on top, squeeze it into another press, chill it, peel it off, and trim the edges and glue it on a piece of paper.
And the
it's
result,
like eating the first oyster.
That's right.
It's unbelievable that anybody ever did it.
The result, though, is so absolutely stunningly beautiful because the print is continuous tone. There's no screen. And you can feel the print. It is, if they're done properly, they look better than the original photograph.
Yeah, and they're also almost always, not always, but almost always, the pigment is purple.
Right.
And the pigment is purple because they're trying to trick the consumer to think it's an albumin print.
Interesting.
So
I didn't know that.
fraudulence sits right under the basis of our medium.
Yeah.
There it is, you know.
But the examples like this through the history, and if you read the printed your MoMA
printed
book,
picture,
the
yeah.
printed picture
Yeah.
book, about all of those processes that were developed through the last century and a half to reproduce photographs, and you come and you actually look at the examples. It's like a religious experience. These things are so beautiful, and they took so much time and so much effort. In fact, there are many things, even prior to photography in the world of printing, that took a lifetime to produce. A
Frank,
single book that took
Frank,
a lifetime.
They stink compared to the digital revolution.
Well,
See, he's not going to agree. This is what's going to be good, right?
I would say
You can disagree.
I'll disagree in the sense that I think that
Be
there's
careful now. Be careful.
there's something about an image. Let's just go back to Woodbury
Yeah.
types that has a dimension to it. Now we're getting that with digital. We have dimensional printing now.
Yeah.
We can lay down a layer of clear toner, for
there's a-
example, and
yeah.
produce an effect like that with a digital press.
See, there's a this is a crucial point, right? There's a physicality to the old mediums that brings something to the print that many of the modern processes do not have. But to me, the question is whether that physicality is relevant to photography or not.
Well,
And as somebody interested in the photographic image in the world, it's not to me.
Well, I'll disagree with
Okay,
that
yeah.
because for me, I believe that a photograph. I believe that a photograph is a devotion. Is a devotional. Is a devotion to the physical world, and the physicality of the photograph. The fact that the light came from reality and had an impact on some kind of physical, whether it was a piece of film or it's a CCD
sensor,
or
yeah.
a sensor, and that is converted into something that is itself physical. I think there's something about that I love. And I agree with you. I mean, much of what we do in the future is going to be on a screen. Much of what we do will be viewed that way. But I still believe that there is something about the physical connection between the photograph.
Frank, I probably agree with you. I hate to say it. Well, Arthur's gotten up because he knows the light's red and we're going to ignore it. Right?
Well, yeah, I think thanks for that conversation. I wonder if you are ready to take some questions.
Sure.
Of course. Frank,
Just
I'm going
to
leave. You
remind
can
the
take-
audience to wait for the mic to come to you.
There's somebody who wants the mic back there.
Yeah.
I'm interested from the point of view of teaching. I actually just started photography. I started in digital, never did film. You know, it just was too much. But what I found was that after working for a few years with a screen and getting a decent monitor and all of that, then I got a printer, and all of a sudden I felt like I learned so much more about the photos themselves and about what I could do once I was seeing them in print.
Yeah, print's
And-
harder.
Yeah.
Print's hard and consequently educates us. And nothing is more liable to vacuousness than the displayed image on a monitor or a projector. So I agree completely. When you have to make a print, boy, do you have to understand the picture.
What do you use, or have you done anything with digital negatives in traditional printing?
Yeah, complete waste of time, but of course.
Yes,
You can make it. When we printed with early processes, just for those who might not be aware of it, almost all the old early printing processes require huge amounts of light, so they can only be done by contact. And so you need to have a negative the size of the print. Now, Frank and I, as printers, know we can't make a printing plate unless we have a negative the size of the print. But if I'm making a platinum print and I want one that's 11 by 14, if I have that terrible judgment that I would be blowing it up, I have to make an 11-14 negative. And we used to go through very complicated procedures making masks to correct the shadows and correct the highlights so the tone was good. Now we can go and we can put a clear, transparent medium in an inkjet printer. We can bang out a negative. It stinks. But we can bang out a second one and put them together and get a tonal range that beautifully emulates the one we could do with film. And it's wonderful. And we can go make this thing, and then we can make a stupid print by making a platinum print of it.
Well, I'm thinking more in terms of carbon print
or a stupid
that stuff.
Carbon print. Now, I'm being difficult.
Right.
There's nothing as physically beautiful as a good carbon print. Nothing is as beautiful. But I come back to the question I asked Frank. What does this have to do with photography? Is it the thing in photography we're interested in? Is it that beautiful physicality, or is it the description of the land use?
Well, I'll just one thing that I've learned is that all of the content that I have produced for the past many years is always available electronically. It's on a website or whatever. But the difference between giving somebody an object like this to look through and looking at the same content on the screen, the experience that the person has is completely different.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I believe, and you said earlier, I think, was the difficulty. The value of it is the difficulty of it, and
well, what you learn because it's so hard, which is your point, right? You learn so much because it's so difficult. Yeah.
But that difficulty now is done by machines, robots. I mean, the robots made this thing. I didn't make it, but the robots liberated me to be able to say, I know what I want it to be. I know what I want it to look like. Let the robots do all of the work.
There's a question over there.
Where's the microphone? Here.
Over the side.
Hi. I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed this talk, and I have a lot of questions I want to ask, so it was hard for me to narrow it down.
One.
I got one, and I'm gonna call you out on saying it's all better.
Okay, that's fine.
And I think you might both have different answers for me, but I printed a Lulu book, and I thought the quality of the prints were horrible.
We shouldn't confuse the Lulu book with the possibilities of the digital world.
Well, I'm not. I don't
Lulu
think.
book is one narrow possibility that we can do, and it's wonderful. But don't confuse it with a good print, right?
Well, see, that's the thing I wanted to ask you. Like, don't you think with this kind of online publishing that the quality of the images, and we're dealing with visual stuff, so you want it to look really good. Like, don't you think that there's such a degradation in quality that it's not even worth it?
Do you mind if I? Is that?
Please.
Is that, yeah, you can. First of all, the great medium for rendering a digital photograph today is the offset press. And the offset press costs $1.2 million, $1.4 million, something like that. And in a proper shop, it cranks out sheets of paper that are so good you can't believe it. The Indigo press, which is what makes all these other books, is struggling to become as good as offset. It is an offset process, but a very peculiar, different kind. And it's getting better and better and better and better. But I think we should recognize that in exchange for being able to send off a file and get a book, we give up something about quality. We just do. In fact, they're miraculous. They're so good. But they're nowhere near as good as, in fact, we could have made a C print. They're nowhere near as good as a good inkjet print. But we get what we pay for, you know. We send off $20, we get back 30 pictures. This is an absolute miracle. So I think that we're getting an awful lot out of it, and I think it's creeping up and approaching the level of fine offset. Fine offset is now the great dinosaur, and the digital technologies in small format printing and printing on demand are chewing at its Achilles tendon, and it's going to fall and collapse in the mud in another 15 or 20 years. But right now it's king, and so I think that's what's going on. Did that answer the question?
It's king, but it's also most of the work is done in China and overseas because we can no longer afford offset to pay for offset work for book work and for photographic work in this country.
And that might start to change. I'm finding now that sometimes I get an estimate here that matches Italy.
Yeah.
Because all across the world, labor is going up.
And labor's going up, and automation is also a bigger and bigger part of that. But I would also say, go back and look at some of the classic books. Go back and look at Robert Frank's Americans and really look at the quality of the printing in there.
In the gravure edition, which is very rare, published as Les
The
Américains
original
or
French
the Americans.
edition.
Yeah, French, and there was a Grove Press one where they imprinted Jack Kerouac's text, but it's in gravure.
Yeah, but I think that at the I started getting interested in digital printing of photographs in '85 when the laser printer, the Apple laser printer came out. We started to play around with that and play around with whether we could do stochastic screening on a laser printer and get and the prints that we created back then were horrific. We made a book in 1987 of reproductions of my wife's family album for her parents' 50th wedding anniversary. She shot stats on a process camera and produced half-tone screens. We printed those down we used those to print down onto C-print paper. Mm-hmm. We pasted everything up the old-fashioned way with tape rulings and CompuGraphic Mark IV typesetting and everything, and put these things together and reproduce them on a Xerox 9700. The book was exquisite. The packaging was beautiful, marble papers and everything else, sewn binding. The pictures were horrific. They were horrible. But it didn't matter because the package, the book itself, people looked past the fact that you could see the halftone dots right in front of your eyes.
So that's relevant to your question.
So I think, while I agree with you that we're not there yet, we're certainly not able to get to offset quality quite yet. Although we've done some interesting things at RIT with the Indigo Press that I would put in front of anybody in this room and say, tell me the difference between this and the best offset printing you can find.
Another question?
Yes, I think we have time for one more. Yes, Sherry?
Arthur, that's only 3 questions.
Well, we'll
That's okay.
no, we'll add one
I
more
won't
after
complain.
this.
This might be more of just a comment, but can't we just say that we have all of these tools together and that maybe we can choose from all of these and include them all in this materiality of photography?
Sure.
Instead of trying to say one is better, because I know a lot of people still work in hybrid ways. Like I still shoot film, but my output is digital. And to also understand that people like stuff. We like stuff. You only have to go 40 blocks uptown to the Armory show to see, how much we like and then price it.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if we're interested in what the photographer likes. I'm interested in what the photographer makes. I mean it. This is a very serious point.
Well, sometimes I think it's important in the process too. Like for my work, the process of making the actual materiality of the photograph is important.
Well, it's
conceptually.
important to the photographer. I don't think it's important to the viewer.
I think if it's important to the photographer, it inherently is important to the viewer.
But let me be difficult. When I say it's better, I'm talking about its potential to describe the world. That's what I'm talking about. And I should have qualified it and said that's what I mean. All that other stuff is very, very interesting, is physically appealing, is fun to do. But in terms of rendering the world, none of that old stuff is half as good as the modern digital technologies. That's the thing that I insist on, okay? See, we have somebody with gray hair who's going to object to me.
I have to say,
I'm sorry.
I would agree with what you say. I mean, I think that we develop an acquired taste for certain things, like the taste of pitch in wine, right? Or because they used to use pitch to caulk the barrels or something. So you develop this taste for something that's horrible and you love it. In some cases, we develop a taste for an artifact of printing that we love, but it's really I would agree with Richard.
It's not necessarily better.
It's not. In terms of rendering what we see. No, I would agree with Richard.
We have to let the gentleman in the
Thank
blue
you.
shirt.
I think you're missing one point.
Okay.
And that's about
Probably more than one.
Well, when the processing power of the digital cameras reach the shutter lag level of a Leica, then I think you're there. But you're not there yet.
Well, you're there if you like to photograph as though you were having a Leica. Sure, that's great. I'm not interested in that. The Leica is the camera where you never can tell where the frame edge is, no matter what anybody says. You never know where it is with a Leica. We've created all this stuff about seeing what's coming into the frame. The Leica is the greatest tool in the world for a certain kind of photography. It's never been surpassed. It's a different thing than an 8x10.
Well, yes.
They're different creatures.
But I think you have to qualify
and,
what
and
you're
the
saying.
shutter lag in the camera that my daughter uses is appalling. You press the button and the person's walked out of the frame. But the shutter lag in my Canon is extremely slight. It's not as good as a Leica, but it's extremely slight. It's fine. It's good enough for me because I'm basically a view camera photographer.
Well, that's okay.
So that's the distinction. Okay. So you're correct, but I think it's about the kind of photography we're interested in.
Okay, we'll take
Fair enough?
one
Yeah,
last
yeah.
question.
And I don't know. I would actually. I'm sorry, Arthur. You know it's hard to shut me up. I don't actually know how the M9 shutter timing compares to that of the film camera. I wouldn't be at all surprised if it was better.
It's not.
Well, I just don't know. I don't know. So I'm saying there's a thing that we don't know.
One more here.
In terms of rendering the world, I'm wondering if the two of you could comment on the contest between the digital C print and an inkjet print.
Well, the digital. Oh, I'm sorry, Frank.
No,
Is that
no.
all right? You sure? There's never been anything as stupid as the digital C print. I mean, it's just unbelievable how dumb that sucker is. You get this paper that's fundamentally flawed because of all the layers and the filtration in the layers. You get the extraordinary technology of the laser in the digital world, and you go backwards in time and put it on this old paper. Now, when digital inkjet printing was inferior, the digital C print was better. But I think that changed hands a couple of years ago, and now I think you can have a far better digital inkjet print than you can a digital C print. So I think the digital C prints are just before Frank can disagree with me, I think they're just stupid.
I would say, generally, I agree with Richard, but there's one example of where I disagree, and that is where you're doing backlit, anything that's going to be backlit.
I absolutely agree.
And you're printing on like a Duratrans or that material. I also think there's some
If you're so
interest.
backwards, you don't put it on a monitor yet.
But there are some interesting substrates the pearlescent substrates and things like that I think have you cannot achieve those kind of visual effects with ink yet.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think we will.
Sure.
But there are some cases where I would say the C print is a useful thing.
Answer? Was it answered?
Thank you, Chip and Frank.
Thank you.